Okay, Dr. Balistraci,
right.
attendance will start coming in.
Good evening. Tonight is Monday, February 8th. This is the Guilford, Connecticut Board of Education. This is our regular meeting for February. To start the meeting, I'd like to invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wonderful, thank you. Welcome to everyone joining us. I would like to ask my colleagues on the board for a consideration that we move around one agenda item, and that is that we move agenda item 9.1, which is to act on the 2021-2022 budget and Dr. Freeman's COVID-19 update, so that those who might be joining in particular for any of the budget conversation have a chance then to dismiss themselves if they need to. So is there a motion for making that agenda item switch? Mr. Sands, so thank you. There's a motion. Mr. Delventura, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, wonderful. So, so we are going to switch items 8.1 and 9.1. All right, item number 3, action on meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the January 11th, 2021 Board of Education meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Rader. Can I have a second? Hi, Mr. Delventura. All right, any corrections to these minutes? Yes, Mr. Sands, go ahead.
On page 4, on the first full paragraph on the second line, it says budget to offset some cost associated. I think it's costs.
Okay, yeah, I had that as well. Anything else? I had 2, if I may, on that same page, all the way down to the second to the last full paragraph, in which there's a conversation about elementary art and elementary world language. The second sentence, this adjustment is in response to requests made by community members through 3 budget cycles. I'd like to add 4 increased art staffing to be clear what the request from the public was. I also want to note on page 5, middle of the page, in response to a request by Dr. Balistraci, Dr. Freeman agreed to provide a full list of the sports teams that include a pay-for-play component. I did not make that request. I'm not quite sure who on the board did make that request, but I know it wasn't me.
Was that Dr. Hirsch?
I think it may have been Dr. Hirsch.
I think it was
so I just want to, again, reflect accuracy. All right, any other corrections?
Well, I just, as long as we're on that paragraph, it says Dr. Freeman will also request that Mr. Jarvis attend the next Board of Ed meeting. I think that's this meeting, but I don't see him on the agenda.
No, I brought that information forward previously, so maybe we should strike that line. Mr. Jarvis is not, I don't anticipate Mr. Jarvis attending tonight.
And we did speak with Mr. Jarvis at our district leadership team meeting, which was held later that week. So it may be that's how that got covered. All right, any other corrections? So we have a motion, a second, a vote on minutes as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any objections or abstentions? No, so Next to the meeting minutes of January 25th, 2021. This was the first of two special meetings. This was the first public forum. Is there a motion to accept these minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hurst. Second, Dr. Best. Again, any corrections? I did have one, and it's a certainly understandable error on this. On page 3, towards the bottom, Mr. Windhurst stressed the importance. That was actually Mr. Corbiere, Corbiere. He did enter, I think, the public forum on his wife's Zoom computer or laptop or something. So, any other comments or corrections? All right, we have a motion and a second, a vote on the amended minutes. All in favor? Aye. Okay, any objections? Abstentions? All right, so that's a unanimous vote. And then the last January 26, 2021, the second public forum special meeting. Is there a motion to accept these minutes?
So moved.
Mrs. Sullivan, second. Mr. Del Ventura, any comments or corrections to these minutes? Mr. Sands, go ahead.
Yes, under number 2 at the end of the first paragraph, state their name and address in the Q&A. I believe it's box.
Yep. All right. Any other comments or corrections? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the minutes as amended? Aye. Any objections? Abstentions? All right, hearing or seeing none, that passes. All right, we are now at a place for a public forum for topics on the board agenda only. So if there are members of the public who want to address the board on a topic on the agenda tonight, they can enter their name and address in the Q&A box at the bottom.
Dr. Balistraci, at this time, I'm seeing nobody in the queue to make public comment.
And I likewise do not. All right. As usual, we always encourage members of the community to also feel free to reach out to us by email if they are interested in addressing the Board of Education on any matter. I'm now going to turn to Mrs. Rader, who is the reviewer of expenditures for the month of January.
Thank you, Dr. Balistraci. Yes, so I reviewed the financials for the month of January 2021. And expenditures for the month of January totaled $5,372,270,067. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of January were 55.72%, which compares to last year, which at this time was 55.54%. Revenue for January was $12,617.95, which included funds that were from Medicaid, part of the town COVID relief funds, and pre-K tuition. Purchase services, the percent of the budget expended is lower than the prior year. We did receive annual payment from our energy performance contract in the amount of $380,743.23. And that has been offset by ZRAC credits from Connecticut Light and Power of $45,591.54 and energy incentives from Southern Connecticut Gas of $278,889. This is all part of our energy performance contract that we began a few years ago in the district. So it's good to see that those funds are starting to come in. Tuition for this year is lower than the prior year, the percent expended at this point. Capital, the percent of the budget expended is lower than the prior year. We had a credit in the equipment instructional line due to the reimbursement from our technology lease, which is like a capital lease that we utilize for technology expenses in the district. In terms of transportation, the percent of the budget utilized is lower than the prior year, and that's to be understandable given the hybrid model. And although we're maintaining full transportation for our district, our Wednesday transportation expenses are slightly lower at this time. In terms of COVID, the balance of the coronavirus relief fund grant, $282,376 has been requested and should be received in February. The total of the CRF grant, which is the COVID relief fund grant, was $473,127. An additional $522,780 has been allocated for the ESSER grant, which is the early and secondary school. It's a relief grant, and we will submit an application for those funds when it is released. Because obviously, as the public can understand, and the board and the committee, due to the pandemic, there's been expenses that were not budgeted in the past calendar year that we are, obviously expending, but we are seeking grant funding to offset some of those expenses. In terms of an operating transfer, we did do an additional $200,000, which was transferred to cover operating expenses of our dining services program. So the warrant we are submitting is a total of all payments for the month listed alphabetically. And the total of payments listed on the warrant is $2,729,95.44.
Thank you, Mrs. Rader. And I know we went over these financials in much more detail in the operations committee that happened earlier this evening. Mrs. Rader, is that a motion for the acceptance of this financials for the month of January?
Yes.
And is there a second? Mr. Del Ventura, thank you. So any additional comments or questions or discussion on the financials? Okay, seeing none, and having a motion as second, is a vote in favor of accepting the financials for January 2021. All in favor? Okay, I'm seeing hands up across the board. Any objections? Abstentions? Okay, so that's a unanimous vote to accept the financials for January 2021. The next item on the agenda is communications. We did receive a few additional communications regarding the budget. Over the last several weeks, we have received communication around different aspects of the budget, whether discussing the equity officer, the residency program, the music position, et cetera. Are there other communications that anyone on the board wants to specifically note at this time? All right, seeing none, I will note that I'm going to review a little bit overall communications when we get to the budget discussion. I'm now going to turn it over to our wonderful student reps who are here tonight to report to us about what's going on in our schools. So Julia's with us and Jerry's with us. Welcome. I don't know who wants to go first.
I can go first.
Wonderful, Jerry, thanks.
So first at Calvin Lee Elementary School, on February 3rd, students celebrated the National World Read Aloud Day, and this day affirms the importance and power of reading aloud with students. The amazing teachers put together a choice board which featured them doing read alouds, as well as a few other things that were shared with students and families. The students and staff at Calvin Lee also are celebrating Black History Month, and throughout the school, the students are engaged in daily highlights of people or events that are relevant to Black history. They currently have students who assist with their morning announcements, and it's a great joy as students hear their peers over the intercom. On Wednesday, February 10th, Calvin Lee will also have the monthly PTO meeting, and a special shout out to the Calvin Lee PTO ABARR committee on the success of their first virtual assembly provided to the 3rd and 4th grade students. This was provided by Bright Star, a national touring theater for young audiences, and they highlighted George Washington Carver and friends. The following statement supports the theme throughout this month and days to come. Inclusion is the only safety. If we are to have a peaceful world, we are less when we don't include everyone. When everyone is included, everyone wins. At Melissa Jones welcomed 14 new students since the holiday break, and it has been great having new faces in the building. 3 Melissa Jones staff members participated in suicide prevention training in an effort to ensure that students in need of support are getting it. and the PTO sponsored the introductory anti-bias/anti-racism committee meeting. There were almost 20 people in attendance, and a big thank you to parent Kristen Ford from LEAP for providing helpful information and guidance. Also, World Read Aloud Day was celebrated here on Wednesday, February 3rd, and Ms. Han did a live school-wide read aloud of The Princess and the Pony, and students and staff contributed read aloud to the school's Padlet. Next, at Baldwin, last Thursday, their 5th grade students had the opportunity to participate in a guest speaker presentation from David Cornsoak, a Native American from the Cherokee tribe in Oklahoma. This connected with the Oklahoma land rush the students are working on in language arts. Mr. Cornstoke shared his ancestors' experience on the Trail of Tears, discussed the land runs, and answered students' questions. The students greatly appreciated and benefited from learning about the Native American perspective of the Oklahoma land rush. BMS Spirit Days have also been going on. The Student Council has been very active in brainstorming and planning ways to build community and school spirit during this time while they are enduring limited interactions. As part of these efforts, the Student Council is sponsoring a weekly Spirit Day each Friday through the end of the year. Last Friday was Pajama and Stuffed Animal Day, and this Friday will be Mismatched Clothes Day. The students and staff are looking forward to these continuing throughout the year. Baldwin also celebrated Read Aloud Day. Their school's library media specialist, Mrs. Deer, took the lead on their celebration of National Read Aloud Day last Wednesday. She was able to provide read-alouds to teachers to share with her students. We appreciate her efforts in bringing quality read-alouds to life for our students. One of their 5th grade teams is also participating in the Great Kindness Challenge, and each day there is a different lesson around kindness and a challenge that is posed to the students. One example of a challenge activity is painting kindness rocks that will be put outside around the school for the school community to find on walks and during mask breaks. This kindness challenge complements the Choose Love initiative and focuses on our community. And finally, at Guilford High School, in January, we launched advisory meetings virtually, and the faculty was very happy to see advisory students after all this time. Report cards will be coming out today, February 8th, and there will also be a spring musical production in April that will be in the same format that we did for the fall Zoom plays. Miss Milqueen Teasdale and Miss Allen are working on securing the rights for the show and will announce in the next 2 weeks or so. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jerry, so much. Julia, go ahead.
Thank you. Also at Guilford High School, GHS seniors received Guilford Grizzly shirts, and I actually have mine right here. So they're cute, and they say Guilford Grizzlies on them, and they have a little I voted part on it because we all voted for Grizzlies. And then winter sports started up. We have fencing, boys and girls basketball, boys swimming, boys and girls skiing, and boys and girls hockey. We're glad that winter athletes will have the opportunity to play this year and participate in their winter season, even if it's limited. And the SEC will hold its annual arts exhibition and scholar leader events virtually this year. For Adams, 7th grade students have read the book Long Walk to Water, and it's about a Sudanese refugee who escapes the civil war and starts an organization to provide safe and clean drinking water in South Sudan. The novel sparks activities for civic action, and students raise money to sponsor wells in South Sudan. Over the past several years, Adams has raised over $10,000 for the cause. February kicked off another reading initiative.
Julia, we lost your sound.
I think she's buffering.
Oh, no.
Cool. Ethan Parker, Erica Zhang, and Marley Kruzek participated in last week's Math Counts chapter competition. Students competed in a virtual tournament, and the results will be shared next week. And Mrs. Robertson also got a grant from the Connecticut Reading Association, which will support the effort to diversify the collection of available literature. Guilford Lakes participated in World Read Aloud Day, just like the other elementary schools, with Miss Lipinski recording 2 read-alouds for the students and challenging them to read aloud to people at home. Grade 3 had NBC meteorologist Caitlin McGrath read aloud through Zoom. The entire class loved it. Several of our classes are making Valentine's Day cards for local nursing homes. Dr. Freeman attended the PTO meeting last week. He fielded questions from topics ranging
Oh, no. The challenges of Zoom. Julia, I think we may have just lost you again. Oh, here you come back.
Back? Okay.
Yes.
I know my room doesn't get any service, but
No, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. I think all of us have experienced this multiple times over the last several months.
So finally, AW Cox students recognized World Read Aloud Day on February 3rd by selecting from a digital reading choice board created by the library media specialist, Mrs. Parodi. The students shared photos and videos of their reading activities. In art classes, students learned about Russian artist Kandinsky and then used lines, shapes, and colors to present their visual interpretation of music. The AW Cox PTO sponsored a virtual enrichment assembly featuring Antonio Rocha, a Brazilian-born performer who used movement, sound, and facial expressions to tell stories and folk tales from around the world. The performance was funny, enjoyable, and filled with worthwhile messages of kindness, compassion, perseverance, and on the inside, we're more alike than we are different.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Any questions for our student reps on anything they reported on? Thank you both for coming. It is always great to get an update. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying thank you. Thank you both for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you as well. It's great to hear the details, some of the details of what's going on in the school. And as usual, I welcome you to stay, but also completely understand that you likely have homework or other things you need to do. So again, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we are now up to 8.1 on the agenda. Again, because we did at the beginning of this meeting revise the agenda, we are now up to acting on the 2021-2022 budget. This is our opportunity to have final discussions and deliberations on the proposed budget brought to us by Dr. Freeman at the beginning of January. We must vote on the final budget tonight. Following our vote, it will be sent to the Board of Finance for consideration. We will be officially presenting this budget to the Board of Finance on Thursday, February 18th in a virtual meeting. Since the presentation of the administration's proposed budget on January 11th, we've heard from the public via email, some phone calls, and during 2 public forums that the Board of Education held on January 25th and January 26th. To briefly summarize this input, we've heard from a considerable number of people asking us to reconsider the proposed reduction of 1 full-time position in music at Adams Middle School, a reduction that is being proposed in response to decreasing enrollment at Adams, and one that echoes some reductions in English language staffing that happened last year, and a proposal for a math position reduction as well this year. We have heard support for the equity officer administration position. We have heard support for our proposed involvement in the student teacher residency program. And I will note that these 2 positions support the work of Guilford Public Schools' priority to further develop a culture and instructional practices that foster equity and social justice in our school community. And that we have received a number of emails in the past several weeks from members of the public voicing their support for this work in general. A number of people asked that we support the inclusion of 2 additional elementary art teachers that are in this proposed budget, so that each elementary school is staffed with a full-time art teacher. A few people have communicated that they supported the inclusion, but expressed concern that this addition would come at the expense of a reduction in world language. And others have likewise expressed that concern about world language specifically. We did have a couple of people express some concern about the math position reduction, but again, this is one that is very much in line with the administration's approach to really monitoring staffing across the district. And then lastly, we have heard a number of people supporting the additional funds that are in this proposed budget for swimming, boys and girls swim teams, and some who are asking for some additional funding. In addition to public input, the Board of Education has met with the district leadership team, which includes principals of each of our schools and the directors of various programs in the district. We've met with the Board of Finance. The board has met with Dr. Freeman, Dr. Crystal, and Mr. Bowden. We have read through our budget books, asked questions during and throughout the last 3 weeks outside of meetings. We have deliberated over areas of concern and discussed potential alternative approaches or considered them to particular budget lines. Tonight, we come together for additional deliberations and a vote to move a budget forward to the Board of Finance. First, however, I do want to note that in our Operations Committee meeting held just earlier tonight, the administration did bring to our attention an adjustment to the salary page in our budget book. So I'm going to turn it very briefly over to Dr. Freeman just to note that exact amount so that we can readjust our starting point tonight for the budget.
Thank you, Dr. Balistraci. As we discussed in the Operations Committee meeting, and with thanks to Mr. Sands, we did identify a number of errors that were on that salary sheet for you. We have corrected those adjustments, and the net of those corrections is an increase to the teacher salary line of $34,000. And so as you look at the teacher salary page, it is $34,000 increased from when we provided that to you. Therefore, the bottom line on this budget as it stands at this moment before your deliberations would be $34,000 increased from when we presented it to you in our initial presentation. We stand ready to discuss that as well as other additions or deletions to this budget as you go through your deliberations tonight.
All right, thank you very much. So I then just want to be clear, per my calculations, with the addition of that $34,000 to the bottom line, the starting point essentially tonight is a budget that proposes an increase of 1.55% over last year's budget. This is now our opportunity to consider what we as a board want to consider in terms of potential additions or reductions. It's certainly our time to ask questions that are still outstanding and to discuss any particular line items that people have. I suggest we may want to start with the item that we have heard, I think, the most about in public comment, which is the proposed reduction of 1 FTE or 1 music position at Adams Middle School. Again, proposed because of declining enrollment and a response to staffing at in the music program and at Adams. But I certainly want to open it up to discussion for that issue. Mrs. Sullivan, go ahead.
Thanks, Dr. Balistraci. Happy to get this started. You know, I think we're all aware of how busy the budget season is every year for us, and you know, meetings and meetings on top of meetings. And I think every year we all feel very responsible to provide a budget that is responsible to both the taxpayers and most importantly to support the students in our town. And of course, it's no surprise to anyone what a challenge this year has been, both emotionally, physically, and financially. And certainly I had to weigh all this as I approached all the decisions we have to make for the 21-22 budget. And to be completely honest, I've changed my mind on many items more than a few times as I've gone through this process. And specifically, since we're talking about music, that is one of those that I've gone back and forth on. as Dr. Balistraci talked about tonight, and we've talked about in other meetings, we have been experiencing an enrollment decline over the last few years that has now reached the middle schools. And of course, we can anticipate that is going to march its way up into the high school in a year or so. And with that smaller enrollment, we have to be mindful of the student teacher ratios and how that's going to affect the budget now and going forward while we can, continue to maintain the excellent programming we have. The proposed FTE 1.0 change in music definitely weighs on my mind because I know we're going to have more difficult decisions in the future budgets as related to decreasing enrollment. But that being said, we have received a significant, as Dr. Balistraci mentioned, and all of us who are in attendance know, amount of emails and also live speakers at our forums who feel strongly about not making changes to the FTE for next year, particularly in light of the difficult year we're in. So, we know that enrollment is down. Is it going to drop again next year? It's possible. We don't know what's going to happen as we get back into school. We don't have a crystal ball. It would be nice if we did. But I'm also aware that students at Baldwin in the 5th grade, where they typically start an instrument, didn't get to have that experience this year because of COVID. So I guess I would like to propose somewhat of a compromise to my colleagues, and that would be to approach this in a phased manner, where we would consider decreasing the budget in music by only 0.5 FTEs this year, noting that would allow for more support for the newest arrivals of Adams, for our musicians, vocalists, etc. So I will leave that there for everyone.
All right. Other thoughts, either in response to Mrs. Sullivan's suggestion or just comments or your own thoughts on this item? Mrs. Rader, go ahead.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Amy, for speaking so eloquently about that. Much like Amy and much like all of my board members, I'm sure I can speak for this, is that we've all given so much heart and thought to the, how difficult this budget process is for everybody, including the community, in light of the pandemic and all we've all been through emotionally, financially, and most importantly for our students and our teachers. And if we're speaking specifics, there's a lot of really great things that are staying in the budget. And I know Dr. Freeman and the administrative team worked really hard to sustain that, even though we're in such difficult financial times. And so I appreciate that. I realize this is the smallest initial budget we've seen, at least in my almost 4 years on the board. Having said that, I do too want to speak to, my concerns specifically with the music program. Much like everyone else here on the board, read every email, took every text, every phone call, spoke to administrators that will be seeing this play out day to day, and speaking with our other constituents in the community. And nobody sees this as just a line item in terms of response to enrollment. But like Amy referred, we have to consider that. And we have to understand that we have a population of students that's getting smaller, and we have to respond to that. And we also have to remember that we have an entire district of teachers, and we have to be supportive of all departments and all disciplines and be equitable as much as we can in light of enrollment. But I too like the idea that Ms. Sullivan presented. I think that we are at a time where we've all been asked to compromise a lot. And in light of the budget, I do worry about our youngest musicians in the 5th and 6th grade that have really lost out on a lot of their support this year, and even their exposure to instrumental music or choral performance. And, we're also seeing some 6th graders that are going to go into Adams and really not have had the typical Baldwin music program, and that they're going to need some additional supports. So I too like the idea of perhaps coming to some sort of compromise where maybe not removing the full 1.0 FTE, but perhaps considering a 0.5 reduction. And I'd love to have at some point here our administrators that might be able to speak a little more to reinforce how, again, like I asked last week, that this would not impact the program offerings, the instructional offerings, and the high quality that we've always enjoyed and expected of Guilford. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Others that would like to speak? Mr. Sands, go ahead.
I agree that in view of the fact that COVID has had such an impact on our students, that the reduction that was proposed by the administration might better be implemented on a phased program, so that the idea that we would have a reduction of 1/2 of an FTE this year and an additional reduction of the 1/2 of an FTE next year, so that the thing would phase out over 2 years, I think is a fair way of compromising here. But I think that we need to be sure that we have enough resources in the coming year to accommodate the, if you will, makeup work that has to be done on this one-time situation.
All right, thank you. Mr. Delventure, it looks like you might be about to speak.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Balistraci. For me, it was never, it really came down to whether we were making the right decision based on enrollment. And the question is yes. I do think that based on enrollment, it would make sense to decrease the 1 FTE. However, given the situation that we're in, and my family is smack dab in the middle of it, we have 2 aspiring musicians, a 5th grader who hasn't picked up her flute yet this year, and a 6th grader who hasn't had any live performance as a sax player. So, really ultimately it came down to timing. With when you add it all up, for me, it makes sense that extra level of support, I think is going to be very useful to these students, especially our youngest students, the 5th and 6th graders, who have been impacted to the point where we want to be able to motivate them to continue their musical career. That is my biggest fear, is that you do have down the line some students that may not want to pick up a musical instrument at some point because they've put it off a year. So I think given this, given what we're going into, the ability to have that extra support there, even given the enrollment declining, this makes a lot of sense. So Ms. Sullivan, very good offer, and I would be in favor of that.
Dr. Hirsch, your hand's up.
Happily, this was also recommended by 1 or 2 of the people who sent us emails this week, which is where I first heard it. Let me just say that I think it is a good idea. We're somewhat caught between head and heart. The head says, and all the data say, this is an enrollment problem. And on the face of it, that's fair. But what we heard from others was that it didn't seem to comport with what they thought either their experience was or would be. So in some sense, we don't know. So I only want to say this, that if we do this, we should commit ourselves to not automatically say that we're going to move to another 1/2 reduction next year, but rather to say it might add back to a full because it turned out what we heard was right, you need that, or that at the time we say, well, it really was an enrollment problem and we can handle it. So I just don't want to automatically make the decision now about where we want to go next year, because we're going to be faced with some of the same conversations, but with more data. But I think where it puts us now is a good compromise.
Others? Dr. Best, go ahead.
Hi, I just want to reiterate how difficult this discussion, this vote has been for everybody, and how much time and work we've all put into thinking about this, and it's a difficult issue. I think that this is a good compromise. Thanks for bringing this up. A 0.5 rather than a 1.0 certainly feels more reasonable to me in this situation. I would also just like to acknowledge, what we've learned through this discussion with the community is that I think music provides a lot for our students. And as we make a commitment to social emotional wellness, music is certainly part of that. And I think an investment in music and other arts is well spent for all of us. So with that said, I think the 0.5 reduction rather than the 1.0 is certainly a good compromise, and takes into account all of the different issues that we've been discussing, and I would support that.
Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, Joe, hold on. Yeah, Joe, can you hold on 2 seconds? I just called on Mrs. Peck, and then I will definitely call on you. Thank you.
Sorry, Joe. First of all, I think it goes without saying that everyone on this call and everyone in our community takes a lot of pride in our music department. It's excellent. It's been excellent since the olden days when I was there. Mrs. Adinolfi had as much of an influence on me as a person as any other adults aside from my track coaches. But I think we all really take a lot of pride in this program, and no one wants to see any negative implications. I do feel like through Dr. Freeman's commitment and Mr. Regan's commitments to this program, and them assuring us that this will not have a programmatic effect, I too am comfortable. I think that a 0.5 reduction is a great compromise. I think it's a really nice way to allow excellence to continue in that program while paying heed to the fiscal challenges that folks have incurred this year, so that we're not presenting a budget that's too challenging for families who are stressed with this pandemic. So I think this is a great compromise. I'm really happy with it. And I hope that the folks who spoke out would likewise find this to be a good compromise, so much so that they would feel comfortable getting behind this budget, which is ultimately what we really need everyone in the town to do. Thanks, Amy, for putting that together.
Mr. Galino, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Ballas-Tracy. I wanted to start off by saying, this is my my first full budget season year, and it is very interesting and overwhelming. And I didn't realize how much work really goes into this budget. With that being said, there's so many intricacies within the budget that a lot of community members don't really know, so they dig into it and understand the numbers and the ratios and where all the money goes. The music program in Guilford is a symbol of excellence throughout Connecticut, in my opinion, and what I hear from other people and other communities with their schools. I have the utmost confidence in the staff and Dr. Freeman, his leadership in making this work with that 0.5 reduction. My boys that were enrolled and are enrolled in the school system have benefited greatly. It's a mental escape. It's a mental wellness program as well, where they could just get lost in their music and learn and really be a part of the program. And I was torn with this one FTE reduction, especially during this pandemic that we have, and learning about the fifth graders not even being able to be introduced to the instruments at this prior year. But going forward, I think they're going to need that extra support. Having this compromise that Ms. Sullivan proposed, I am in complete support, and I think our community is going to really benefit by us working together, as we all are. And I'm really proud to be a part of this team, and I'm glad that we're coming together to make this work and propose this great compromise. But thank you all. Thanks,
Joe. I just want to say, first of all, I want to say thank the administration, Dr. Freeman, Mr. Regan, across the board. Every year they have to sit down with their particular schools, in Dr. Freeman's case, obviously with the district, and make really detailed review of all of their programs, of their staffing, and make some really challenging decisions about what they put forward. And they do that individually, and then they do that as a group. And we need them to make decisions around staffing and efficiencies. We have a system that is completely supported by our community. There is very little money that comes from the state or anywhere else. So it is most certainly our job, I think, to support high quality education, instruction, and programming for our students. But it is equally our job to be responsible to the community that supports us, both financially and in so many other ways. So I agree. I've heard at least some of my colleagues make this point specifically. This is a reasonable, this 1.0 music FTE reduction that came to us in this draft proposal is a reasonable reduction given all of the enrollment numbers that I have seen, given the cuts we had to make to the English language department last year, given, as Mrs. Sullivan said so eloquently, the things that we think are likely coming down the pike in the next couple of years as these enrollment reductions start hitting the high school. These are all going to be really challenging decisions, and I think that we are. I am incredibly appreciative of an administration and a district leadership team that is willing to look so carefully and make these difficult decisions, maintaining the quality of programming that we offer and instruction that we offer, but really recognizing the multiple responsibilities that we have. I also recognize that the pandemic has had an impact, and we've certainly heard from the community, from community members, that they have concerns about that. And so I think Mrs. Sullivan's proposal here, I agree, maybe one that really allows us to recognize kind of the responsible budgeting that we need to put forward, but also recognize that what we may really need here is to allow this program a little more time as students come back in September, as fifth graders go into sixth grade without having, as Mr. Delventura noted, touched an instrument, which normally that would not be the case. So I appreciate the compromise. I think this has been a really challenging decision. I think I certainly have been trusted Dr. Freeman, Mr. Regan, Mr. Buno, many of our administration who felt really quite secure that the quality would continue. Again, though, I recognize that if we can perhaps respond to the concerns of those who don't necessarily see the inside picture all the time, and just take at this point a 0.5 reduction in that position, I can certainly support that approach. I think we've heard from everyone. That doesn't end the conversation necessarily. So I do want, is there anyone else, either Board of Ed members or others, who would like to speak on this topic? I'm not seeing anyone.
So Dr.
Freeman. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be happy to weigh in. So,
yeah.
I just want to say that this conversation tonight, and in fact, the conversation over the last couple of weeks as community members have stepped up to talk about this topic, not that it matters, but it just really makes me happy. being the superintendent when a school district is growing and expanding is fun because you're out fighting for more resources and drawing those resources into the district to support the growing student population. When a school district is seeing declining enrollment, and particularly when a school district is seeing declining enrollment in tough financial times, it is our responsibility as a leadership team to make difficult decisions and make what we know are going to be unpopular recommendations. A number of our neighboring communities have closed schools because of similar situations. However, having put out, having made a difficult decision, having shared that decision as part of our proposed budget around this music reduction, and then listening to the community come out and talk about their investment in this program and their passion for the program and the value that their kids see for the program, and then listening to your conversation here tonight, it reminds me that moving slowly is often a wiser path than moving quickly. When we have grown out other resources in our school system, as we've increased special education staffing, as we have increased staffing around mental health and social and emotional wellness, as we've grown out supports in the district for teachers in their instructional practice, we've done all of that slowly and over time, taking incremental steps. And I think the suggestion about downsizing in this particular area in response to enrollment, it's a great suggestion to take incremental steps is here as well. To reduce by 0.5 this year rather than 1.0 makes sense. It will allow us some additional capacity in that department based on the numbers. Based on what I have heard these last weeks, as well as here tonight, I think we need to consider students at Baldwin as well as at Adams with that additional capacity that this reduction will allow us. And to Dr. Hirsch's point, every consideration year to year is made individually. So when we were growing out departments, we made individual decisions each year about whether or not this was the right year to take another step. And so there's no commitment here tonight to continue this reduction. There obviously will be a reassessment and a reevaluation of that. And next year will be looked at about whether or not that's the right year to take a continued step. But the idea of adjusting gradually over time makes a world of sense to me. It's an eminently logical, in fact, simple response. And I really do appreciate the community members who raised their voices and the board members who are responding here tonight. Mr. Regan, I don't have any question that you and your team will be able to use that resource, work with both Mr. Hamill and Mrs. Chaff, and make sure that we're distributing the music FTEs in a way that best supports our students. And again, I want to reiterate, this will not reduce or eliminate options or offerings to the students. It will not eliminate contact time, and it doesn't change our value on scheduling teachers toward their strengths and toward their areas of specialization.
All right. I just want, Dr. Freeman, I want to make sure that I understand, because I'm now starting my calculations here as we go down decision making. Can I safely assume that based on what is pretty clearly an agreeable approach by all the board members, that this would be a $25,000 increase on the bottom line of the proposal where we stand? And Linda is going to be now my partner throughout the night. I've been sitting here trying to calculate, and I believe what that does is $25,000 increase now puts us at an increase in dollars of $977,592 and a percentage increase of 1.59%.
What was the increase amount that you had?
I had so we have the correction already of 34,000 in. I'm adding now another 25,000.
That's right.
And I'm getting a 1.59% increase.
Right. But what was the dollar amount of the increase that you stated?
977,592. If that's not entirely accurate, oh, that's not entirely accurate, sorry. Oh, yes, it
No.
is, right? We had a 918,592 in the original draft proposal. I've added 34,000 for the correction and then added
Oh.
25,000 for,
That's why you're rounding it to 34. What I
Yes.
is not rounded.
oh, okay,
Yep.
okay.
59.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It is still a 1.59% increase. I had.
Okay,
You guys, yeah, you guys are differing by $150. Yep.
Okay.
It's because of rounding.
yes, okay.
Yep.
And if we recognize that, that's important. Okay,
Yes.
so excellent. So, and Mr. Joe, thank you, because it won't be the first time, last time I call on you tonight, I'm sure.
No problem.
So, there are many ways we can proceed with this conversation. There are many different parts of the budget. One approach is this. Are there any other additions to the budget? And then we'll go to reductions. Any other additions to the budget that any Board of Ed member thinks we might want to consider or they would like to see us consider at this point? I'm scanning the Zoom boxes and I'm not seeing anything. Okay. What that suggests then is that our next step is to consider any reductions to this budget. I'm going to state my personal opinion, which is that I would really like to see us get back down to a 1.49% increase. And per my calculations, that requires another $58,000 reduction. And I'm going to ask if the place that may start, Dr. Freeman, I believe the proposed budget may still include an artist in residence program. And I'm wondering whether that can now be, I guess I'd like to propose, if I'm correct in that assumption, that might be removed, given the assumption that we are keeping the two proposed elementary art teachers in the budget.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's a logical suggestion. We continue to have $10,000 in the budget for artist in residence. With the expansion of the art time next year, it does not make sense to continue that sort of calendared pull-out program based on that. So that would be a $10,000 reduction that we could take at this time.
Are there any of my colleagues who want to discuss that further or have any concern with that suggestion? I am seeing none or hearing none.
Dr.
Mr.
Baltracy.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Freeman. Thanks, Ms. Sullivan.
Well, I was also going to say that I think that I can help the board. The pension committee has met subsequent to the time that we provided this budget to you. And sometimes this will happen. The number that we put in a couple months ago was maybe a little conservative. After the most recent pension committee meeting, we believe that we can reduce that pension increase, the increase to the pension contribution, by $40,000.
Okay, so that would be another 40. Is there anyone who, again, if the pension committee is suggesting that, I'm not sure there's a need to get concerned, but I don't want to assume that all are comfortable with that approach. Mr. Sands, go ahead.
Well, it's not just the pension committee, it's actually the recommendation of our independent auditor.
Okay.
The pension committee made a change to the assumed discount rate, and then the auditor came back and showed us what the result of that change was, and that's the $40,000 plus that Dr. Freeman is referring to.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. That's a more complete
explanation. With this change, we would be fully funding the recommendation of the actuary as to how much we put in.
Okay, that's very helpful. Does everyone agree that that's a reasonable step to take here as well? I'm seeing some nodding heads. Mr. Galino, please feel free to to call on me if I understand that you're unable to be on video, so I'm not going to see you if you want to speak. I'm happy to.
No, I appreciate that. No, I'll chime in, but I do agree with Mr. Sands. I do agree with what you're stating. I'm just listening very carefully right now.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to do a check-in with Linda because it's just helpful for me to think this way. Those two reductions are an equivalent of a 50,000, a total 50,000 reduction. At this point, per my calculations, that takes us down to a 1.51% increase. Can you confirm that for me? Oh, she's nodding her head. Yay!
Yes.
See? Excellent. All right. And I do want to give people opportunity. I have again stated my interest in seeing this go to 1.49%. Others may have comments. Go ahead, Mr. Sands.
Well, I think that we should look at other areas where we could make a small adjustment. I think we only need to make a $10,000 or $12,000 adjustment. And I think the area that stands out to me would be in the retirement savings. I think I think we could take a $10,000 or $15,000 increase there, which would put us under the 1.5 hurdle.
I agree, Mr. Sands. I think at this point, this budget assumes a retirement savings of $70,000. I just think that if we were to make a $9,000 adjustment there, we might get to the 1.49 where we started. But I agree, $10,000 adjustment at the retirement savings. I believe that we should have reason to anticipate that we would realize that savings in the coming year.
And just to clarify that at the moment, the proposed budget brought by the administration has a $70,000 proposed reduction based on an expectation of retirement. So Mr. Sands, you're suggesting simply adding to that reduction,
making it an $80,000 reduction.
$80,000.
Okay.
That should actually bring this budget to just slightly below where it was when we as the leadership team brought it to you as a board.
Mrs. Rader, did you want to say something? It looked like you were.
Well, I feel like you explained it. Just for the public that's watching, we talk in terms that we might be familiar with, but the public might not. When we talk about retirement, like savings line items, that we're speaking specifically of staff deciding to retire after we've set this budget, and that we're predicting based on historical data a number to put behind that. We're not enforcing that or predicting. It's just a prediction. It's not a we're going to enforce that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Rader. This is a projection, and at $80,000, we would be assuming that there would be between 2 and 3 teachers who are at the highest end of the salary scale in instructional areas that are not shortage areas statewide, and that when those teachers retire, a replacement would very likely be hired at a lower step on the salary scale. And this number of $80,000 again projects 2, 3, maybe 4 such retirements. And our historical experience leads us to believe that that is a conservative number. I'm not worried about realizing that savings in this year's budget.
Other thoughts from my colleagues on this particular proposal for the $10,000, adding a further reduction in this line to make the retirement reduction an $80,000 reduction instead of a $70,000 reduction. Is that something people feel comfortable with? I'm seeing some nods. I just want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to weigh in. Okay. So again, I haven't done that last calculation. I'm sure Mrs. Trudeau is ahead of me on this.
Linda,
I believe though that brings us down to a 1.49. Is that?
Linda, could you actually give us total budget, total increase in dollars, and then increase in percent?
Sure. total budget would be 62,445,900. The increase amount would be $917,441, and that still would be a 1.49%.
All right.
So it's a couple $1,000s lower than what we brought to you, but the same percent increase as what we brought to you as a leadership team. It includes the salary correction. It includes the music reduction of only a half a teaching position, not a full teaching position. And then it includes the adjustments that we spoke of just now with the reduction of the teacher in residence dollars, a reduction in the pension line, and an increased projected retirement savings from $70,000 to $80,000.
Artist in residence program.
I apologize, I misspoke.
Okay. Are there, where we've gotten so far certainly gets us where at least that I would like to see things. I'm one of 9. Do people have other concerns or thoughts, or do people feel, my colleagues feel like this is a good place to be? I know we did, I think a number of us have noted kind of what a carefully crafted and conservative budget this is that has come to us. You know, Mrs. Rader noted that it's the lowest she's seen in her 4 years. I believe it is the lowest that I've seen in my 9, that a draft proposal from the administration has come to us. And I am extremely appreciative of that. I think we all recognize that this is going to be a particularly important year to be as efficient and fiscally responsible as possible, given the pandemic and its impact on our community. Go ahead, Mrs. Sullivan.
Just very quickly, I would just say, you know, I feel ready. It may seem like compared to some of our other meetings that at an hour and 10 minutes, we're making significant quick progress. But just for anyone who may have not tuned in last week, we have been at this. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, you know, pouring through this budget book, asking questions, you know, asking each other questions, getting clarifications wherever we need to from Dr. Freeman, from Linda, and everything else we need. So even though we may be moving faster tonight, this is sort of the final bit of this for us. So I feel comfortable with all my questions answered.
Okay, thank you. Are there other board members who have comments? Go ahead, Mr. Del Ventura.
Yes, likewise. You know, my biggest concern after the addition of the salary correction and the 0.5 FTE was to get us to this point, back to 149. And I'm very comfortable with where we are right now.
Okay. Others, Mrs. Rader, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just concur with my other board members that have spoken already. I feel comfortable about these reductions. They're all based on a lot of data and input from our administration, and they all make perfect sense to me to kind of get us. I do believe it was important to get us back to that 1.49 number going into presentation to the Board of Finance next week. So thank you for all the contributions, and I agree.
Others? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Sands.
Well, I'm in agreement also. Look, we've all listened to and spoken with a lot of constituents and parents. Various people have various priorities. Some people in one area, some people in others. It turns out that in this constrained financial year, we're not able to accommodate all of the requests, but we've certainly made an attempt to accommodate as much as we could. I wish we could do more, but I think it's important that the parents of students understand that how the process is going to play out from here. Once we approve a budget, we're going to send it to the Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance is going to, in their wisdom, consider it along with a budget from the town. And they may come back to us and ask us for further reductions. They certainly have in the past, but we'll see what happens this year. And after they have negotiated something with us, the budget will go to a referendum. And this referendum is very important because, unlike in some other towns like Brantford, here we have an absolute participation in democracy in that the budget has to be approved by the voters. Now, it's a separate referendum. Nobody's running for office at that time. We normally have a very low turnout. Between 14 and 21, 22% of the eligible voters will actually show up. And it's important that parents take the time to vote in this referendum, because there is a significant group of people here in town who do not agree with some of the concepts that we have discussed today about trying to improve the schools or spend more money on the schools. There are people who have second homes in Guilford. There are people who are retired and no longer have children in the program. There are people who send their children to private schools and don't really think that the public schools here are their concern. And so there are quite a few people here who are going to vote no on the referendum. And if the parents of the students don't come out and vote in the referendum, sometimes the referendum gets turned down. In the 7 years I've been on the board, this happened to us once. And when that happened, we were not in a position to increase anything. In fact, the Board of Finance came back to us and ordered us to make a mid-six-figure reduction in our budget, which was very, very difficult to do. And we had to cut programs right and left to accommodate them. It went back for a second vote, which thank goodness was passed. So I would really suggest to anybody who's listening that when this comes up in April, you've got to come to and spend a little time, go and vote in the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. Other thoughts before we call a vote? I just would like to say a few words. There's, it's never a fun deliberation when I think, as some of my colleagues have noted, when we're looking at enrollment decreases, and as Dr. Freeman noted as well. And so one of the things, we're having to look at staffing, we're having to look at programs, we're having to cut to try to make sure that we are kind of responsibly, again, kind of being responsible, I should say, to our community that supports us. I will say, I think there's some really exciting things in this budget. And I would just like to note at least a couple of them that I am particularly pleased to see and pleased to support. One of them is an addition of a social worker in this budget. I think we've had a number of meetings over the past, certainly over the past 5 or 6 months, but perhaps even back as far as last March, in which we have expressed concern about the social emotional wellness of our students in general, and particularly given this pandemic. So I am really glad to see that one of the priorities of this budget is to try to make sure that we have the staffing for our students and for our teachers, the support that they're going to need across the board, regardless of the subject they teach, to kind of come back and really give the support we need. I am really excited about this residency program and this equity officer. I think the administration has engaged in an approach here to support an initiative that we all voted on at the beginning of this academic year to further kind of foster the development of equity and social justice. And I think that these two positions are two examples of kind of an attempt at diversity and inclusion and support for students who might need it in our district. So I you know, again, I recognize that that there are some reductions here that are hard, but there's some stuff in here I think that I am just really excited about, and I will happily with Dr. Freeman present this budget to the Board of Finance on February 18th, because I think that we've made some really careful and thoughtful decisions from a budget that was brought to us after some really careful and thoughtful decisions. But I'm really excited about some of the stuff that's in here. All right.
Dr. Balistraci, if I could just add, I just want to thank the board for the work that went into this. I have said for a long time now that a good budget, a reasonable budget, a responsible budget is full of hard decisions, and making those decisions should be hard. I want to thank the community for their participation in this process and for making some of these decisions, difficult decisions to make. Weighty decisions don't come easily. And I want to thank the board members for the time and the energy and the listening that you put into this budget. And I believe that we have brought it to a good and a responsible place that will meet the needs of our students and protect the quality of our programming, even in these most unusual of times. And again, I just want to thank you for the thoughtful deliberation that you've put into this.
Thank you. And then before I call vote, I also just want to thank the district leadership team. Mr. Regan is here with us right now. I believe we have other members of our district leadership team who are not necessarily on video right now, but are participants. I know there's a list of them that I have seen, and they've been providing us with answers to our questions. We've had a number of them. We have reached out to them, and on top of, again, my aforementioned appreciation for the amount of hard work and time that went into crafting this budget. We certainly appreciate your willingness to respond to our questions so that we could then respond to this budget. All right, so I am going to suggest the following. I am going to request a motion for a Board of Education budget to be forwarded to the Board of Finance in the amount of $62,400. No, 62 million.
Million.
Man, we're good, huh? $62,445,900, which represents an increase of $917,441, which is a 1.49% increase over last year's budget. Before I ask for a motion, I'm going to ask Mrs. Trudeau to nod her head and tell me that I've done that accurately. Excellent. All right. Is there a motion, again, to send the budget forward with the numbers that I just put forward? And excellent. Dr. Hirsch? Mrs. Rader, I have many hands up, many people interested in seconding this. I think there's a lot of support for this. All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any further conversation based on the decisions that we've made tonight and the final number that we have? All right, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. I have Mr. Sands. Aye. I have Mr. Del Ventura. Aye. Dr. Best. Aye. Moira Rader. Aye. Dr. Hirsch. Aye. Mrs. Sullivan. Aye. Aye. Mrs. Peck. Aye. Mr. Galino, can I call on you for your vote?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And myself, aye. So I believe that is a unanimous vote in support of this budget being forwarded to the Board of Finance.
And again, thank you all.
Thank you. And I do want to thank my colleagues, and particularly I would like to thank Mrs. Sullivan for her creative approach to tackling what I think has been a really challenging decision-making process for a lot of us over the last couple of weeks. So a shout out, Mrs. Sullivan, to you on.
Well, I would send that back to you, Dr. Balistresi, because I don't think that everyone out in the town is aware, but we do read all the emails that we get. Many of the emails get sent to Dr. Balistresi or Dr. Freeman alone, and not always to the whole board. And I can't even count how many emails that Dr. Balistresi has responded to on our behalf. I honestly don't know how she finds time to do it, but that is a significant feat. So
thank you. And for those of you who emailed and may not have heard back, please note that at some point the inbox does get very full. I can assure you, I have read every single one. Every one that has not been sent to the entire board has been passed on to the entire board, and my colleagues likewise have read them all. So wonderful. The next item on the agenda is now the COVID update. We're going back to the superintendent's report. So Dr. Freeman, I'm going to turn it over to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Balistresi. I don't know that it'll take long to share this update this week, but the current numbers in district at this time, we have been aware of 96 students over the course of this school year who have been identified as COVID positive. We are aware of 25 adults in the system who have come to our attention as COVID positive. Some of those instances are situations that do not impact the school directly. It could be because we became aware of the positive case over an extended weekend or over the school break, and the positive did not extend back into time where a student was present in school. However, in many of those cases, as the community is aware, it has resulted in some other students who have been identified as close contacts and have needed to quarantine as a result of that positive. It has resulted at times in whole classes needing to quarantine. It is often cascaded where other students who aren't necessarily needing to quarantine are needing to shift into a distance learning format because teachers are affected and out of class. And sometimes it's one class of students that is learning from home. Sometimes, particularly at the middle grades, it has been a whole team of students who are learning at home. And in more than a couple situations now, it has impacted a whole school where the impact on staffing has risen to the level that it has impacted the whole school. The good news in all of that is that we continue to feel confident that the mitigation strategies that we are employing in the schools are working. In all of those cases where we've identified an individual case and then needed to respond, we have not seen other students from that cohort or from that class, other students who have had to quarantine or shift into distance learning who have subsequently tested positive, telling us that even though the student came into school or the adult entered the school setting and was positive, that the mitigation strategies we are following in school didn't allow the infection to be transmitted in school. So when I'm talking about the mitigation strategies, I'm talking about the altered schedules that we're continuing to follow at Adams and the high school that are continuing to reduce density. I'm talking about the strict cohorting that we're following in grades K through 6 that are keeping student social interactions really limited during their school days. I'm talking about lunches in classrooms rather than cafeterias. I'm talking about plexiglass dividers in many of the classrooms or at other locations throughout the school. And most importantly, I'm talking about our masking and the fact that students are taking the masking really seriously and doing really well following those masking protocols. So we're confident that in the condition in which we find ourselves, we're keeping our schools safe. The bad news is that even though we're beginning to see some declines in this most recent spike nationally and around the state level, student numbers haven't really started to slow for us. They're slowing very, very minimally at this time. We do expect that we may be able to begin to see slowing numbers of positives for students, but they have not slowed dramatically for us. They certainly haven't dropped down to really low levels that we would be happy with. We've sent out communications recently encouraging students and parents to remember that outside of school activities impact what's happening in the schools. If we can bring those student positive numbers down to 0 or really low, we're going to be able to start looking at expanding our schools and opening more. If we can get the student numbers to drop or to disappear, then we'll be able to open the schools more fully, 5 days possibly at the elementary and at Baldwin, and going away from this hybrid schedule at the middle schools and high schools. But particularly as we're still concerned about the prevalence of these new strains, we want to be cautious about taking that next step. Additionally, I think many in our community are aware that vaccine distribution to teachers has been slowed. And so at this point, although teachers remain in group 1B for vaccine distribution, we are currently distributing vaccine across the state to the 75 and older population. I believe next week we will begin distributing vaccine to the 65 and older population. We have 86 members of our staff out of approximately 800 when you count all part-time and substitute staff members. 86 out of approximately 800 staff members who fall into that 65 and over category. We will be encouraging those staff members to pursue their vaccination as part of that being in that age category. That gets us to slightly over 10% of our adult population vaccinated. We do believe that there will be rollout of vaccine beginning to teachers in early March at this time. So again, if we can really continue to watch the student positive numbers continue to decrease more significantly than they've decreased so far. If we can roll vaccine out to our entire adult population in the building, we are hopeful that we will be able to continue to assess where we are and possibly be at a point as early as mid-March where we can be having conversations about opening the schools more fully. Again, the best news here is that we believe that the practices we have in place are working. We know that those are impositions. We know that quarantining a whole class or needing to shift a whole school into a distance platform is an imposition, but those are the types of things, those are the types of responses that are keeping our students safe. And we're committed to continuing to do that, providing distance learning in the interim until we know that we can more safely open schools fully. And Dr. Balistraci, that really is the report for this evening, although of course I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from folks? Dr. Freeman, I do have a question. Do we know, I think we know, when teachers, whether it's those who are in the category of individuals 65 and older or just teachers in general, is that going to be happening through the East Shore medical kind of regional public health, or do we know how that's happening yet? Is that definitely decided, or?
Yeah, the 65 and older will be happening individually statewide in the same way that the 75 and older
Right.
has occurred. So any individual on our staff, just like any individual who lives in Guilford who is 65 years or older, can go onto the VAMS website and can individually schedule their appointment at any of the available locations. We are still not completely sure
Okay.
when we begin rolling out to all school staff, regardless of age, exactly how that is to be handled. So the last time that I gave you an update, we were working in collaboration with both the Madison Health Department as well as the East Shore Health Department, which services the towns of East Haven, Branford, and North Branford. The most recent conversations that are occurring are pursuing a suggestion that school districts would be enabled and allowed to distribute vaccines to their staff members individually and in-house. And so at this point, That's a conversation that would certainly be easier. It would be logistically easier for us to arrange, but we're still following those conversations, participating in those conversations. The bottom line is no, we still don't know how we will distribute to staff members when it gets to staff members.
Okay, thank you. I thought I saw a hand raised. Does someone have a comment or question? Feel free. No. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, we obviously, I guess to say we look forward to the COVID-19 updates is a mixed message, but the more information we have, the better. So thank you. We are up to agenda item 10, reports of committees. Do we have any report from the policy committee?
All right, Katie, thank you. We have a scheduled meeting on February 22nd. We'll be continuing our discussion and work on newer legislation regarding Title IX. And there's also some information that's been relayed to us by CABE, which is the Community of Board of Education in Connecticut. And we'll be reviewing that in terms of special ed policies.
Wonderful. All right. Any comments or report from the operations committee? I know we did meet earlier this evening, but I don't know if there's any additional information, Mr. Sands, that you want to share.
No, not.
Okay. The curriculum instruction and assessment committee.
Yes, we just had a meeting a couple weeks ago. It was very interesting and productive. We talked about culturally responsive teaching methods and had some excellent guest speakers. And I think that it was very informative for everybody. So we won't have another meeting for a couple of months.
Okay.
Dr. Best, if I may, I would just encourage community members, if they have an interest, to go to our archives and take a look at that meeting. I thought the guests did a wonderful job. I thought that the earlier curriculum instruction and assessment meeting from this year with Mr. Bushnell and Mr. Russo was equally engaging. Really would encourage community members who are interested to find both of those meetings on the archives and take a look. To Dr. Balistraci's point earlier tonight about the board initiative to continue to build an environment and instructional practices that are equitable and socially just. Both of those meetings speak to that concern, that priority, and they're available on our website. I would just encourage folks to take a look.
Thank you. And I would just note that we do plan to continue the discussion and have an update later in the year, towards the end of the year.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any liaisons to town committees? Are there any reports from anyone regarding any town committees? All right, none. Liaison to the Learn board. Mrs. Peck, is there anything to report from Learn?
Yes. Well, we have our next meeting is this coming Thursday. So now I'm digging back 4 weeks ago. Let's see. They are starting a technology consortium where they're going to start sharing technology specialists for some of the smaller districts. And it seems like Learn as a shared learning environment is going to just start doing a lot more of these little small consortiums where smaller districts have the opportunity to share a teacher or to share a specialist. Even some of the mental health specialists are going to wind up working in cohort together to be able to provide additional services to smaller districts from Guilford all the way up to the Rhode Island border. So that those smaller schools can still benefit from excellence and from some positions that they might not be able to employ on their own. We talked again at the Learn board about the teacher residency program, which everyone here is becoming familiar with as we are including that in our proposed budget. This is something where Learn is estimating we will have 40 new teachers for the 21-22 school year, which is really exciting. So that will hopefully increase the diversification of Connecticut teachers significantly. And I hope the community was able to watch some of the teaching sessions for families where Learn and Guilford worked together to provide 3 different learning universities. Dr. Freeman, I'm assuming those are available on the website for anyone who missed those. I know that all three have already happened, but those are programs that Learn, in conjunction with Guilford, has actually devised to help parents figure out how to navigate online learning. So I would recommend that anyone who has interest in that go and find those on our website.
Those were recorded. They are archived on the website. Yep, you're correct.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I thought was really fun, their marine science school has to sell coral. They've been growing coral for the last number of years, and they now actually have to sell it. So if anyone needs coral, you can contact them and the marine science school, and you can actually purchase coral that the kids raised, which is so fun. And that's it. Our next meeting is this week.
And Mrs. Peck, if I could just add, Learn has also, across this school year, Learn brought together a small network of superintendents and local school districts who were working on issues of equity, social justice, culturally responsive and sustaining instruction. There's been about 6 of us working in that network with Dr. Lee Title from Harvard this year. I was in a conversation today because the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents is looking to to grow that and to replicate that across the state for Connecticut superintendents all over the state through partnerships with other RESCs. And so just wanted to highlight that the work Learn is doing down here with us and with other local districts is being recognized and copied across the state. So other superintendents will have the opportunity to work with Dr. Title and do similar work next year moving forward.
Wonderful. Excellent, everyone. So the next item on the agenda is just a note that public questions, if people have questions, please continue to email us. We're certainly available to try to help. I'm just going to briefly state the next steps. You've heard a couple of them, but just briefly state the next steps in this budget process. So the budget will be submitted to Town Hall tomorrow, the one we just voted on. We will be presenting the budget to the Board of Finance again on Thursday, February 18th. The Board of Finance will have a public hearing on the budget on Tuesday, March 2nd. And I'm sure we'll all be hearing about that quite soon in terms of specifics and how the public can participate. They also have scheduled, as they do every year, 2 additional meetings, March 4th and March 8th, for discussion and their own deliberations. They may or may not need 2 additional meetings, but they do reserve that time in case they do. Far ahead, but please put on your calendars that there is a tentative date for the referendum on April 20th. I do believe that the town is still trying to figure out, given the fact that we are in a pandemic, exactly how that will be implemented. Thank you to my colleagues again for the extraordinary amount of work that I know you put in over the last month plus when you first got your budget books. Thank you, Dr. Freeman, to you and to the administration for bringing us such a well thought out and crafted budget with, I know, some difficult decisions in it. Thank you, Mrs. Trudeau, for keeping me honest in my numbers. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Good night. Oh, I have to make an motion to adjourn. Look at me. I'm just, just moving along. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Thank you, Mr. Sands. Second, Dr. Best. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.